His guru becomes his disciple. She takes her little Krishna statue that for her was everything. She invested all her spiritual power in making that Krishna statue alive. And then she goes and she throws that statue in the Ganges. She says, now I see there is a living Krishna. I don't need the statue anymore. I see God in man. It is with great amazement and awe and with a shivering heart that we will share today, in my opinion, the most important spiritual story of the last 2 centuries, the amazing life of Sri Ramakrishna. For the past 20-something years, his life has been an integral, was and is, to great intensity and with great love, integral part of my own life. His life, in my eyes, to my understanding, is the beginning of a new spiritual age. He lived a very humble life and had only a few dozen disciples, but it was perfect spiritually. It was perfect in a way that hasn't been perfect for a long time with anyone. And he displays an old new form of spirituality. He displays a certain spiritual perfection which is, in my opinion, the model of our time. He represents the breaking of the spiritual dogma without throwing away the spiritual essence, but rather by throwing away the dogma, the essence shines forth even more. And as we will see through his life, he was able to do that not just with one tradition, but with many. He was able to attain enlightenment through Tantra, through yoga, through bhakti, or the act of devotion, through jnana, through deep meditation, and then through Christianity, through Islam, and through various spiritual ways. And in all of them he succeeded to reach the highest spiritual level, and his life stands as a unique testimony in the history of mankind, showing, like in a laboratory, that every authentic spiritual path would lead you from Alpha to Omega. You can reach the roof through a ladder, you can reach the roof through going on stairs, you can climb on a tree next to the house and jump on the roof. He says it doesn't really matter. All of these traditions lead you to the same roof. The adoration of the Mother, the adoration of Christ, the path of Islam, the adoration of Shiva, the negation of the world, the negation of God with form, everything leads you to the same spiritual goal that is beyond words and yet extremely, extremely tangible. As many great saints, his parents had problems conceiving. His father went to pray. He had a vision of Krishna, and Krishna said, yes, I will come. Prepare yourself. I will be born in your wife's womb. He was born in 1838. He was an extraordinarily spiritual child, and at the age of 7, walking, they had the rice, and if you were a rich child, so you had a bag to hold the puffed rice, and if you were poor, you would hold it in your shirt like that. That was the finances of poor families in India 200 years ago, and he was one of the poor kids, and he had, to my memory, I don't remember actually which category he was, but he had his puffed rice with him. And then the sky was very, very black, and a bird passed which was very, very white, and he looked at it, and it was so beautiful that he entered his first state of God consciousness, of samadhi. He fell on the ground unconscious. His body couldn't take the spiritual impulse, and he just stayed there. He didn't hurt himself that time. He hurt himself some other times when he fell. But he stayed in communion with God, lying there on the floor, on the ground, for a while. He was a very active, very sweet, very simple child. Everybody in the village loved him. He was very interested in women and how women think. And he said, I would really understand their feelings and emotions already as a child. He didn't learn how to read and write. He could not get his head around. He said, when I would try to figure out the mathematics in school, my head would spin, but I was very good in drawing. And he had very much this very down-to-earth mind. When they would play little plays in school, and they would depict all sorts of deities, because that's how they do it in India, he would enter spiritual ecstasy. He would play Krishna and enter ecstasy already as a child. Being a Brahmin, from the caste of the priest, he became a priest, a very poor priest in a temple in Dakshineshwar next to Calcutta. He was a priest of Kali from a very young age. He worshipped her like a madman. And his life, as we will see, stands as an example. The question of how to practice spirituality, no matter what kind of spirituality, is answered through his life. How to practice spirituality, read his biographies. I think I read 6 or 7 of them. This is how a master practices. And when he was 18 and 19, this is how a master to be practices spirituality. He would forget most of the existing rituals, and he would just adore her with tears, with love. There was not a statue in front of him. It was the Divine Mother. It was his everything. He adored her for years and did not receive divine vision, and it was excruciating. He said, the pain I felt, it was like somebody squeezed my heart with a towel. I longed for her so much. I was broken inside that through all my efforts I could not find her, and I grew extremely desperate. In my despair, I decided that if I cannot see the mother that I love, if I cannot see Kali, I'd rather kill myself, I'd rather die. And he said, Kali, if I can't see you, I'm going to chop off my head. And he took the sword, because Kali has a sword there on the statue, and he was ready to cut his head. And as these stories often go, also here, the mother appears in front of him. He let go of everything. It was a clicking open, renouncing the little ego that wants to live for the sake of that great love. Do not try this at home, please. It takes an accumulative state. You cannot just fake it like that. He entered the state of samadhi, seeing the Divine Mother, and from that moment she will never leave him. He would see her so many times. The visions that he had later in his life, this will be just the first part of the lecture. We'll speak more about his later years in another lecture. But later on in his life, he would sit with his disciples and he would say, oh, Kali, here you are, showing off with your new Banaras sari. Sit there and be quiet. I have to speak to these people here. This was his relationship with Kali. She was his best friend. She was his everything. He would cry like a child, just mentioning her name. One of his disciples there, he was doing japa. You know, they have this mala, tick, 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 repeating the name. And he says to his disciple, what kind of practice? He says, oh, I'm doing japa, I'm repeating the name. She says, maybe I try also. Can I have your... And the disciple gave him, and he started, Kali, Kali, Kali. And he was just exploding with love after repeating a few times, and he entered samadhi. He lost his outer consciousness. It was enough to just repeat her name, to just remember her. They would sing songs of Kali, he would enter samadhi. He had a very particular way as we will see also in the coming lectures, they had a very particular way of entering samadhi. They would mention Kali or Krishna or divine love or the gopis loving Krishna, or sometimes just thinking of his disciples, because his disciples for him was God. Somebody would just mention one of the disciples that he loved so much, and then with such a love he would stand up. That was his thing. I cannot stand up now because I come out of the picture, but he would stand up and enter samadhi. His way of awakening, and then very often he would fall. And his disciples knew, and when he would stand up and enter samadhi, his eyes would roll and his body would basically lose consciousness. One of the disciples was normally fast enough, there was an attendant, and he would catch him before he falls. During these visions of Kali, he saw everything as conscious. He says the walls were conscious. The cat that I saw, everything was divine consciousness. And he saw Kali in the cat. So he took the food that was offered to Kali by people. You know, he was the priest, so you give the food to Kali and so forth, and he gave it to the cat, because the Kali was in the cat. The cat was very happy to receive whatever Kali was offered, but the people were extremely offended. And there was quite a lot of persecution against him, and they wanted that mad priest out. He was quite troubled in that time, and he prayed to the Divine Mother, and he asked for support. He says, please find me some rich man to give me some food and to take care of me and to protect me so I can continue my practice. And as he was praying in this way, he describes later, when he would pray, it would manifest. There was no gap. And he would be very, very attentive what he prayed to. He prayed, and his prayer was answered. And as he was walking back and forth, like a total madman, we'll speak about his spiritual madness a bit later, he was walking back and forth in the yard of the temple. The owner of the temple and of the entire compound, actually the nephew of the owner, Mathur Babu was his name, saw him walking, and as he was walking one way, he was Shiva, and as he was returning, he was Kali. And again Shiva, and again Kali, and again Shiva, and again Kali. And Mathur Babu thought he's lost his mind completely. He just stared and stared and stared and stared, and eventually he ran down. This huge aristocrat, they were among the richest families in Calcutta of the time and in India of the time. This huge aristocrat ran and fell at the feet of this great priest and touched his feet. Nobody knew that Ramakrishna was a saint at the time. They just thought he's a cuckoo. As you know, I don't know if you've been to India, but if you go around the temples, you see a lot of cuckoos. You're not sure who is a saint and who is not a saint. He fell at his feet, and Ramakrishna was very embarrassed. He says, you are an aristocrat, why do you touch my feet? And he says, no, I saw you as you are Shiva, and you are Kali. And from that moment he takes care of him, and he doesn't let anyone offend him. He was all sorts of persecution, will not enter it. He was beaten, he was all sorts of things, because he was completely unorthodox in his worship. He would touch the untouchable. There was no social rules for him. There was just a divine law. When he was 25, he meets his first guru. You can imagine the loneliness of being such a spiritual practitioner without a master, and having these very, very high cosmic states of consciousness without anyone to really explain to you, without anyone who is there. So after some years of this very intense madness and probably quite a lot of spiritual loneliness, he met his first guru, a female, Bhairavi Brahmini, as he called her. We don't know her real name. She was an adorator of Krishna. She had a little statue of Krishna, and she knew the Tantras, she knew yoga, she knew Kundalini yoga, she knew all of this, and when she saw him, she had the spiritual level to recognize that this was an utter saint. And she started teaching him the Tantras, and whatever he learned, he would practice for a few days and attain the highest goal. And attain that practice and that ritual and understand, and this is Kundalini. He has the whole process of awakening of Kundalini, the 7 valleys as he describes it. He goes through the 7 chakras in a matter. From the text it looks like a few weeks or a few months, that he experiences the chakras on the cosmic levels with all the difficulties, and it was a very, very hard period, and finally reaches the Absolute through the awakening of Kundalini. So we had reaching the Absolute through Kali, and then through Kundalini Yoga. His guru becomes his disciple. She takes her little Krishna statue that for her was everything. She invested all her spiritual power in making that Krishna statue alive. And then she goes and she throws that statue in the Ganges. She says, now I see there is a living Krishna. I don't need the statue anymore. I see God in man. And she stayed and she taught him for some years, and she took very good care of him. And then he learns the teachings of Vaishnava, the teachings of Krishna and of Rama, Vijatadhari. And he is mainly in his life a Kali devotee and a Krishna devotee. These are the traditions that stayed, let's say, the most alive in him. At the age of 29, he meets his second or third guru, for this matter, at least the third. There were all sorts of others that would teach him here and there some things, but as the major ones, he meets the highest of them, a great saint called Tota Puri. Tota Puri was a master of Advaita Vedanta, non-dual Vedanta, probably the most elevated and most difficult spiritual path. It is the adoration of God without form. It considers form, mind, time and space as an illusion. Me and you, any kind of dualism as an illusion. And above that, beyond that, is a construct of the mind, maybe if the word illusion is too harsh. Beyond that, in total silence of the mind, there is an attributeless, timeless, spaceless, absolute, Parabrahman, that you can say nothing about. It exists, and compares to how much that exists, this world looks like some fluffy dream, completely illusionary. Tota Puri was in the forest for decades, 40 years if I remember correctly, holding this one understanding. This is the path of Jnana Yoga, of the Absolute. And he saw Ramakrishna, he had a tapas, a vow, he would not stay anywhere more than 3 days. He saw Ramakrishna adoring Kali, and he told him, you can go further than that, I can teach you more. Ramakrishna said, I don't know if I'm allowed, I go and ask Kali. So he goes, and he asks Kali, can I study with this man? And she says, yes, go further. So he sits with him, and Tota Puri says, empty your mind from everything, focus here, and empty your mind from anything. Do not allow any object to enter your mind. And then through this Guru Shakti, through the power of Tota Puri, you will reach the Absolute. And Ramakrishna is very strong disciple. He's able to stop all his mind, but he keeps seeing Kali. Kali was all the time everywhere. And Tota Puri asks him, what's going on? Where are you? I can't take you further. He says, I can't. I see Kali all the time. I've been with her for so many years now. I'm just with her. And Tota Puri gets really, really pissed. And he says, no, you go beyond illusion, beyond the mind, beyond name, beyond form. Cut everything there. And he breaks a bottle, he takes a piece of glass and pushes it quite strongly into Ramakrishna's forehead. It's strong enough that it stayed there, and Ramakrishna is bleeding from his forehead. And Tota Puri tells him, focus there and think of nothing, you understand? And Ramakrishna, assuming the disciple role, he takes the sword of discernment, of Viveka, and cuts the image of Kali. And when Kali is gone, everything is gone. Also Ramakrishna is gone. 6 months, he stays motionless. His body is basically dead-ish. Flies would enter through his nose, come out through his mouth. His consciousness is with the Absolute. Tota Puri stayed with him. He broke his vow. He stayed with him and he took care of him. And together with another disciple they would hit him with a stick so that the body consciousness would shiver a bit. He would wake up and they would shove some food, some rice, some milk in his mouth and force him to chew. Also in the life of Anandamai, such practices would be made so that the body stays alive. He could have easily died in this great samadhi, but this was not the divine will. Somebody was there to take care of him. Tota Puri later stays and studies from Ramakrishna, and he accepts also the Divine Mother as he comes back. When Ramakrishna is 30, a year after that, so he becomes very sick after 6 months, and that draws his consciousness back to the body. I don't know what he had, one of these bad diseases, cholera or something. And so he returns to the body consciousness. He says, over there is just light, there is just consciousness. And I was consciousness, I was light, and I would go and meet other conscious, which was also light, which was also me, and that was that for 6 months. 6 months he was like that, and he returns with a tremendous godly power. I mean, he was extremely powerful before, but after those 6 months, he has a spiritual authority and a power which is incredible. For a period, his chest glows with light. He describes in the Gospel of Ramakrishna, my chest would glow with physical light, and others could see that my chest is glowing with light. And he realizes, if my chest continues to glow like this for a while, I'll have 1 million people here at my door asking me to marry their daughter and to give them blessing for a better job. And no spiritual seeker will find me. No real seeker will find me, because I'll have 1 million curious people asking for favors and whining at my door. And he prays intensely to the mother and he says, turn off this light. It will bring a lot of unnecessary people here. And the light goes off. He meets Govinda Roy, a Hindu guru who was practicing Sufism and Islam. And he reads to him the Quran. And Ramakrishna is like, oh, this is amazing. He puts on white clothes, a white hat. He cannot look at Kali. And he prays 5 times towards Mecca, Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah. He assumes Islam with such intensity, he even wants to eat meat. But he's a priest, still, you understand, that's his job. He gets food every day because he works as a priest in the Kali temple, but he cannot look at Kali anymore. And he wants to eat meat because he is a Muslim now. And after 3 days of doing the 5, Muslim prayers with all the particular gestures, he enters Samadhi. And he meets the Absolute, he meets Allah through the path of Muhammad, through the path of Islam. He goes through all sorts of spiritual states. He worships Krishna as if he was Radha. He dresses up like a woman. He was so well disguised, his friends thought he was a woman, because he was completely in love and waiting for his beloved Krishna as if he was a woman. He adores Rama as if he was Hanuman, as if he was the monkey god. And even his tailbone started sticking out. And he really would behave like a monkey and adore Rama in this way. Hanuman is one of the great adorers. He goes through all sorts of crazy spiritual states. He meets a divine madman at a certain point who's eating from the food of a dog. And he looks at him and he recognizes him. And he says, are you a divine madman? And then the divine madman recognizes him back and says, yes, let me teach you some things. And Ramakrishna, he says, all my hair was standing on end. This person who was completely dirty and smelly and barking like a dog was a divine madman, and he started teaching him all sorts of things. And then when people would come, he would act like a madman. But to Ramakrishna, he would teach him. And he goes through all sorts of crazy spiritual states. And then at the age of 37, he meets one who would become one of his main disciples, Shambhu Mallik, who reads to him the Christian Bible. And Ramakrishna falls in love with Jesus Christ, a love that will not wither throughout his life. And he sees a painting of the Madonna and Child Christ, and the painting becomes alive, and he fuses with Jesus Christ. And in some testimonies he says, this was the peak of my spiritual life, fusing with Jesus. And he had in his room a picture of Kali, of Shiva, of all sorts of deities, and a picture of Christ saving Peter from the water. And he would offer, Indian, like Indians, he would have his incense and he would offer in the mornings and in the evenings. He would make puja for the picture of Jesus Christ. And he stayed very open and very devoted, and he speaks often with his disciples about Jesus. This stage of the discipleship is like a ritual. It is not there, as we will see in the next Ramakrishna episode, it is not there because Ramakrishna had something to solve. As we will see, Ramakrishna is an avatar, an incarnation of God. All this stage of his spiritual, when he is a spiritual disciple, all that is rather to show the world and to change something in the world, so that people can understand and have a solid proof, not an intellectual proof, but a solid proof of direct experience, that the essence of all spiritual traditions is the same. We have a few examples in history with Kabir, with Guru Nanak, that would walk two, Islam and Hinduism, two traditions, and succeed in that. But Ramakrishna's all embracing with so many traditions that reach the same goal stands somehow as the basis of the spirituality of this epoch. And the spiritual schools that emerged after, as our school in the Atman Federation, as the school of Yogananda, of Kriya Yoga, they were somehow made possible through this example of a harmonious combination, synthesis of different spiritual traditions to reach the same goal. And we will see in the next chapter, we will speak about his teachings and how he was as a teacher to his disciples.
Hey guys, if you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content on spirituality, Tantra and more.
And if you want to sign up for our online classes or for our retreats, you can see our website on the description below.